Hello and welcome to Class Skill Tier List, the updated version. So I haven't done one of these, I think, in a long time. So let's get to it. So what are the class skills? Class skills are unlocked at level 5 on an advanced class. And some of them are royal classes only, others are just random classes that you can put your units on. So the first thing we will look at is Smash Plus on Berserker. When making a smash attack, push the target 2 spaces instead of 1. Now, in normal gameplay, this really doesn't do too much. I have seen this used in, I think, an LTC, where they moved a dude 2 spaces and it actually mattered. But in normal gameplay, this is just like, okay. So let's say C tier is okay, and B tier is good, A tier is great, S tier is OP, D tier is bad. Okay. Now, how much time do I have in the game right now? I probably have around 2,200 hours. That is not an exaggeration, by the way. How do I know I have 2,200 hours? I hit 2K hours not too long ago, and I have multiple playthroughs going, one of which is at 100 hours, and 2 others are like 50. So around 2,200 hours at this point in time. And I've done challenge runs, normal runs, mostly no DLC runs. Most of the runs I don't run DLC. So this is like within the context of the use case that you're actually going to be using these on, right? Like not just like in a vacuum. We're evaluating based on when these would be used and how they would be used. All right. Allied Defense from Great Knight. Let me just confirm. Yeah, that's the name. -3 damage if you are in front of an ally when you are taking damage. So Great Knight, I'm not a huge fan of. I feel like it's not that good of a class. I know some people like it, but -3 damage isn't bad. And if you speed fix the Great Knight, it won't get doubled, and some of them can actually double fairly well. I'll say this is okay. This is this is good. Definitely better than Smash Plus. It actually does something that's useful for a tank. It increases tanking, and it's also, as far as I can tell, true damage reduction. So, say for example, an enemy boss uses an engage attack on you, it will reduce the damage that engage attack deals. So if it's like a Lodestar Rush, a Quad Strike, something crazy like that, it'll just straight up reduce whatever the damage value is. So if it's like 7 times 9, it'll reduce it to 4 times 9, which is huge. So also it helps just with tanking, so it's pretty decent. It's definitely better than Smash Plus, which you could argue is bad, but we'll just put it here because it's kind of neat. All right, next one is Fogato's, I think Back At You. Let's see, let's make sure this list I'm using as reference has all of them. It does. Okay, Back At You. When countering, unit may deal extra damage equals half of damage taken. Trigger % equals dex. So basically the way this works is if Fogato gets hit for, let's say, 10 damage, he has a dex % trigger to flip half of 10 damage back. So he'll flip 5 back in this example. And his dex is typically around like 30. So 1/3 of the time when he gets hit, he will flip half of that damage back. Now, that is not the best trigger condition, and the damage scaling on it's whatever, but at least it's like okay. Like sometimes it happens and it's like, oh, that actually got me. There were like 2 or 3 instances where this actually got me a kill, just randomly, that he wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And it was like, oh, that's neat. But it's not so consistent or reliable that it can really be controlled or leveraged like some of these other dex proc skills. And it's conditioned to trigger it. It's like getting hit and flipping half the damage is already a condition, and then the dex roll is just kind of unnecessary. Brave Assist. I would say it's fair to say Brave Assist is OP. You can basically make a team of Brave Assist, Dual Assist bots, and they will wreck everything. And any attack, even if it does 1 damage or 0 damage, can be turned into huge damage and easily kill bosses. This is one of the few class skills that, just by it existing, drastically improves damage output and helps the units in question basically turn the rest of your team into free damage, even if they deal 0 damage. They can literally turn 0 damage into kills if you have enough of these. So it's quite good. The next is, I think, like Focus. I don't know the name of it off the top of my head. Careful Aim. I was going to say Focused Aim. No, it's Careful Aim. If unit initiates combat without moving, hit +40. Now, this actually is a little more interesting than it seems, though, because it's on Bow Knight, but Bow Knight doesn't have to just use bows, so it can use any weapon. If unit initiates combat without moving first. So basically, if you are positioned well and the enemy gets within range, you now have hit plus 40 when initiating. Honestly, this is kind of decent. Bow Knight isn't a bad class, and it's definitely better than these. It's conditional, but it's controllable. You can easily set up a unit to be like within 2 range and then shoot an enemy next turn. It's especially good at killing Griffin Knights. So if you know a Griffin Knight's coming at you and you don't enemy phase it, you put it 1 tile outside of where the Griffin Knight's pushing from or will push from. And it's like the Griffin Knight ends up 1 tile away from you, and then you're just hit plus 40. So now you can actually hit the stupid thing, because some units really struggle with hitting these fast enemies like Griffin Knights and Wolf Knights. And also you can use this with a melee weapon. It doesn't specify it has to be with a bow. It shows an arrow in the description, but it can be used with any weapon. So if you enemy phase something, obviously you have to not move first, which is tricky. So you're basically going to be getting attacked anyways. And it also requires you to initiate, but it's decent. Hit plus 40, can't go wrong. Chaos style, easy S tier, speed plus 3 when attacking physical things with magic and magical things with physical. And Mage Knight can run both, and it's just a pretty easy, consistent player phase speed plus 3 passive on Mage Knight, which is also one of the best classes in the game. So it's kind of hard to say this is ever bad. Clear the Way, I would say is A tier. I'm only putting it in A because it's only situationally useful. There's a few maps where Clear the Way helps move other things around. It's also one of the best combat classes in the game that also has staff utility, Griffin Knight. So you're on a super fast class that can fly, and you can remove terrain, like movement penalties from the map. So if there's like fire, if there's like trees, if there's fog, everything except for the sand on chapter 12 for whatever reason, this thing can allow units to move freely. I can't remember if it lets you walk over water. I think it does. I could be wrong about that. I can't remember if it just lets you straight up walk over water that land units can't walk on. It might. Don't quote me on that, but it definitely can get you over like puddles and like walkable water without movement penalty. So it's very good utility on a really good combat class, and it's just nice. It's just nice to have. Diffuse Healer. So this is on Martial Master. When unit is healed, all adjacent recover 50%. Honestly, I used to say this is kind of bad. This is kind of decent. Like, this is actually pretty good. Because what can happen is, if the unit just takes damage, or if it chain guards and it catches a heal, it will just spread the heal out. And especially if you take damage. So if you get healed for 30, all adjacent get healed for 15. And that's pretty insane. That turns the unit into an AoE heal, which is actually very big value. Especially because it's on a utility unit, and some of these Martial Masters, that's the class it's on, can actually kill things and participate in combat. So they one-round something, take some damage, then they get healed, and then they can spread that heal out. It's just a constant source of like AoE heal if that thing is taking damage. It's free, it's nice. It's definitely better than these, that's for sure, because it actually has a very practical use case, which is reducing the amount of things that need to be healed. So like if fewer things need to be healed because of this constant free source of AoE healing, that saves you actions, which is very good. Next is the Divine Dragon passive, Divine Spirit. Units engage meter is shortened 1 step. Now Divine Dragon, I don't think is a very good combat class, but this is at least B tier. Or you could argue it's low A. Now you could argue it's S for the Dragon Instruct Dancer, because it just makes it so Lear can reset, like, you know, Dragon Dance and Dragon Instruct is a little bit faster. But in the actual game, shortening it by 1 step situationally matters. It's also in a class that doesn't have staff access. So if you want to quickly reset something, Fortify is the best way to do that. And a single use Fortify can reset an entire meter. Brave Weapons can reset a huge amount of your meter, if not the whole thing, in a single turn. So it seems better than it really is, but ultimately I think Divine Dragon's combat kind of makes it weak, but it still is good. It's definitely better than these. In fairness to this passive, it's still better than these. Fell Spirit, this is on Veils. At the start of each turn, units engage meter is filled by 1. So it's basically this, but it gives you extra meter for free. Now you do, however, have to keep Veil on her Dragon class, which is not as good as her on other things, but it still is free engage meter. So if you want to have a different Dragon Instruct, it's just like passively building its own meter. It should be a little bit better than this, but this is better availability. But this is this, but better. Because this, let's say it takes you 5 steps to get to something, or 6, and then this puts it to 5. Let's say this one, you take 6 steps. As soon as your turn starts, it takes 5. And then the next turn, it takes 1 fewer step each turn. So this just helps you build back faster. This is basically just an objectively better version of this. So if you want like a dragon instructor, Veil is just like a little bit better at it. Golden Lotus on Avenir prevents 50% of physical damage, trigger percent equals dex. Alfred's dex is usually like 20 to low 30, maybe like high 20s, like 20 to 27 or so, 28. So around like 1 1/3, a little bit less than that. Chance to have damage. I'll say this is high B tier. The class is quite slow. If you Veil bot check it like on fixed mode, it doesn't get that fast, and even with like speed +5 and speed wings, it still tends to be kind of slow. But at the very least, he can avoid getting doubled. It's still free damage reduction. It is random. It's not as good as other passives, like the other passives that trigger based on dex. But it's not bad. It could be on a better unit. Alfred's stats are okay. They're not the worst. This is the only unit who can use it, so we kind of have to talk about the unit in question. Like other things can't just run Golden Lotus. But it's decent. It's about similar to this, I would say, to Allied Defense. Void Grasp. When attacking with a tome, a unit may deal extra damage equal to half of foe's magic. Trigger percent equals dex. Now, I still think this is S tier. I put it in S tier a while ago. I still think it's S tier. Why is it S tier? Most people use Ivy as a hard carry. LTCers use Ivy as a hard carry. People who play fast use Ivy as a hard carry. Anyone who just runs Ivy and keeps Lyn on her is going to be using her as a hard carry. Especially if you bonded shield her, or you just have her attack a lot of things. She's just going to randomly deal more damage. And sometimes that is the difference between getting a kill or not. At the very least, she has more damage potential than other units as a result of this. So it doesn't hurt to have, and it's just constantly giving you free extra damage. Even if it's only like 1 in 5 chance, if you attack 5 things, chances are it shows up. And very often it can be the difference between a kill or not. So I think it's S tier. It's free damage on one of the best classes in the game. You can't get better. It can't get much better than that. Hobble. Wolf Knight. If unit initiates combat with a knife, inflicts move -2 on foe for 1 turn. So you have to specifically use knife. And Wolf Knight typically uses knives. And this is like a movement debuff to kind of hold in place a specific foe. Now, I think this is A tier. I'd say it's like here. I wouldn't put it in S because Wolf Knight, unless you're making it in a void tank, can't usually stay in the fray that well. So when it forces things to stay within its range or kind of fight it, sometimes it can die, but it can be used to like save a weak thing from getting one-rounded by movement debuffing some big threat. And it also always works on bosses, which is nice. So if there's a boss that's about to kill one of your units and other units can tank that boss, you can debuff its movement, which is quite nice. But also it can just be used positionally to debuff things so that you control them and force them to fight the things you want them to fight, which is, it's definitely better than the B tiers. Ignis. Or my Saline fans at. Ignis, during combat, made half of strength to magic damage or half of magic to all other damage. Trigger percent equals dex. So her dex tends to be like 20 something. I think it caps at like mid 20s. I could be wrong about that, but it's at least like 20 something. She doesn't have like the highest dex. Now, it does get to around like a 4th proc rate, which is decent. It's free damage. The dam is like medium speed and it needs speed fixed more than other things to double consistently if you want to use like heavy tomes. But it's not a bad passive, and it's on a unit who's a good utility unit, so it's just random free damage on a good utility unit, worst case scenario. I would say this is like here. It's decent, and you can make Saline 1 round consistently if you give her the right build. She's not a bad unit. Luna. When attacking, may ignore half of foe's defense and res, trigger percent equals dex. So this is Alchrist's unique. Honestly, I think this is A tier too. It's just pretty decent. It allows him to 1 round more things, and allows him to penetrate armor, and he has pretty high dex. He tends to be in like the 30s to mid 40s as you approach endgame. He hits 30 dex pretty rapidly, so he has a near 50-50 chance to proc this, and especially if you start doing things like going for the crits or going for Brave Bow, you can one run pretty consistently with this, and it's not too hard to train him. He's relatively fast with speed +5. He has like, I think 9, eventually 10 build, so he has like average speed with 10 build, so he can kind of get away with some things. He does need some speed fixing though, but the passive itself enables him to deal bonus damage. It also works on things like Luna, Astra, which allows you to multi-hit at range, and he has a covert, so he can proc this and deal more damage with that, or any multi-hit like Lodestar, for example. Now Lodestar on him, you can use Roy's swords, but any multi-hit or AoE, Luna can proc. Now the only problem with this class is it's bow only, so it can't enemy phase. So unfortunately, the only instance where you could Luna into enemy phase would be when using an emblem. So you could potentially make like a sword power Roy build, or maybe even like a gentility Roy build, where he enemy phases and player phases with Binding Blade at 1 to 2 range, and then he has like a pretty near 50% chance to ignore half of their defense and res, which could get him one rounding. That's still a build I need to test out, but it's a good passive that damage fixes. I would say it's a little bit better than Ignis, a little bit more consistent, maybe a little bit better than Hobble. Merciless. Unit deals plus 50% damage against broken foes. This is pretty crazy. First of all, it's on one of the best classes in the game, Warrior. And also, it's a very easy condition to meet. So you can oftentimes take like a low damage unit. Let's say you have a Brave Assist Warrior who doesn't even really deal damage. They literally just have Brave Assist and unforged weapons. You can have them break something, and if it's like a fast enemy, or if it's just a difficult to kill enemy, the warrior can then just hit really hard and usually one-shot off of that. Or in some cases, you can fracture like worms, then have your warrior merciless one-shot it very easily. I had like an under-leveled Saphir on my ringless no Somniel run, practically one-shotting worms off of merciless with unforged. She has no passive, no rings, just a tonic with strength. Unforged steel great axe or silver great axe, practically one-shotting them, doing like 80% of their health. So if you forge that thing and give her like a little bit extra damage, you would have killed there. So fracture combos are really good. You can also do things like override a bunch of things and break them, and then have like the warrior do like a Roy attack or something like that. There's all these interesting combos you can do to boost the damage. But you can also use Micaiah to AoE fracture, and then have the warrior do like an override to get 50% damage on the override. There's some interesting, crazy tech you can do with this, but also breaking is an easy thing to do, and it's on a class that already has high strength and good speed and strength and speed growth, so it's just generally really solid, and it deserves a spot in S tier for sure. No distractions. Crit plus 10 on sniper when the foe can't counter. I'll say this is C tier. I don't think sniper is a good class. Doesn't really do anything useful. It's bow only, but unlike Alchrist, it doesn't have this like good passive. Some characters with high strength can kind of make sniper look good. They're better off on Bow Knight. Bow Knight's just better. Bow Knight's just better. Crit plus 10 when they can't counter. Just give me crit plus 10, that'd be better. Because there's a lot of 2-range enemies in this game, so there's going to be a lot of things that are countering you. And Killer Bow with like a crit engraving on a sniper, you're probably just better off going Bow Knight, to be honest. It just has a better passive, it has more move, it has access to other weapons, so it can enemy phase or at least hit at 1 range for good damage, which does matter, especially if you're attacking other archers. So it's just okay. I haven't really seen any good sniper builds ever, so and I've been playing this game for a long time. For only a year, but like 2,200 hours. Pass on Thief. Bows don't block this unit's movement. I would say this is like here. It's good, but it's not really that good that it matters. It doesn't come up enough where it's like, oh man, if only I could get through these enemies. That's almost never a thing in this game. If you're not doing some kind of challenge run, you're going to be wasting enemies left, right, and center. So you're not going to be really worrying about, can I get past them? Let me zoom in a bit. There we go, that's much better. You're not going to be worrying about, can I get past these enemies? It is nice occasionally, but it's not consistently useful almost ever. And most thieves are going to be chilling out on the void tiles anyways. So the best use case of this would be from moving to avoid tile, or setting up a specific kill, and that's it really. So it's good. It's definitely better than these. It at least serves like a consistent thing, but it's whatever. Pincer attack on halberdier. If unit initiates combat while an ally is on the opposite side, always follows up if weapon allows. So what this does is, if you have even 0 speed and you're using like any weapon that can follow up, so no great weapons at all, and there's an ally on the other side of the halberdier, you will double. So regardless of speed. So this allows units who cannot double to consistently double if you set these up. And Swordmaster also has run through, which allows you to move through things. So you can have like a Swordmaster with canter, run through, kill something, and then canter behind something, and then set up a halberdier pincer attack pretty consistently. And honestly, I think people underestimate how good Swordmaster actually is, because it basically doesn't need speed fixed on most characters. It just needs damage fixed, which is actually very easy to do in this game. So honestly, I'm going to be bold here and say this is an S tier. Now, I know people don't run halberdier and they kind of meme on it, but functionally, this is a crazy ability. If you can consistently set this up, or even semi-consistently, you can take any unit regardless of speed and have them double. That's a very powerful ability. I haven't seen people use this much, but I also... It's like with Smash Bros, right? Like Smash Bros Melee. Oh, this character's low tier, this character's bottom tier. Then someone masters that character, and then you have the best player who's beating everyone as some weird off-meta character, and it turns out that people just didn't get used to using it. I think that's the case with this. It has so much potential. I have a hard time believing that it's not going to be insane when used optimally. I think people just don't run halberdiers, they don't get used to using pincer attack, and therefore they write it off and think it's trash. I think it's overpowered. I think we just don't use it well. I think it's really a skill issue here on the player base's part, and maybe even my own as well. And also, I think run through, I've been using a Kagetsu Swordmaster in Divorced and Homeless, which is ringless no somniel, and then no second sealing into new classes, but you can second seal into like master sealable classes. And it's actually really useful. So let's evaluate this now. Run through. Use to attack adjacent foe, then move to space opposite. I'm putting this in S tier too. I'm gonna be the guy. I'm gonna be the Swordmaster guy now. I just believe it's a good class. I've seen enough of it. I see how easy it is to damage fix. Kagetsu on Swordmaster, leave him on it. Just straight up leave him on it. He can be damage fixed. You can hand him sword power. You can hand him gentility for damage increase. You can hand him Erica. You can hand him Roy. He gets so fast on the class that he doubles without needing speed plus ever. So you have basically 2 optional passive slots. If you give him a forged, Fencelar or Killing Edge, and then throw him on Erica or Roy, he will one round everything he attacks. And then with run through, he can reposition through the thing he attacks and move extra tiles, and reposition for backup attack setup, reposition for pincer attack setup, and so on. I think these 2 classes are just untapped potential that people just sleep on because there's more brain dead things that are more obvious, but these I think are like high skill, like master level play, like tech, like because they have the positioning, they require good positional play, and these 2, it seems like they work off each other. So I really want to try, like I already know Swordmaster is really good and run through is really good because I've been using it, and I can see the potential of pincer attack. You don't need any speed fixing at all and you can double. That's crazy. There's no way that's not good, especially if you put it on the right units. All right, pivot. Use to move to the opposite side of adjacent ally. Paladin. Paladin, I mean, this is good. It's on Paladin, though. Is Paladin good? I think Paladin's decent. I think Paladin's another thing that's slept on. This is decent. This is at least good, I would say. Why is this good? This allows you, let's say you move 6 tiles to an ally, and then you pivot, you get to move 2 more. That's pretty good. That's really good. I don't see how that's not good. That's free movement tech. That's nice. It's decent. It's not the best thing, but it's free optional thing. Maybe it's useful every now and then. You never know. Gives you 8 move essentially if you can move up to an ally. Reforge. Reforge is interesting. Reforge is actually pretty interesting because there are combats where you would just get broken once and then Reforge sets you up so that you can enemy phase the next enemy. And it can be useful, but the real question is Royal Knight really that useful? And is chain guarding just better? Because basically you could achieve a similar result just by chain guarding the first attack, except you just never get broken. But this is a free passive that always functions and removes break and can be useful for enemies or for allies who cannot enemy phase because of a break. So like let's say 3 enemies attack you, first one breaks you, second one hits you but you could counterattack if you weren't broken, third one hits you, you can counterattack for the third combat. So the Reforge allows you to counterattack twice in this instance instead of once. And it is decent. I would say it's good. I would say it's like high B tier. Now, Royal Knight, I think we need to experiment with a little bit more. I think it's a good class. It's definitely not as good as like the A and S tier classes. Now, this isn't the rank of the class. This is just the rank of the passive on the class used in the context of the game on Maddening mode. But this actually isn't bad. It has use cases, it's niche, but you also have to consider that Royal Knight could just be a staff bot too. It doesn't necessarily have to be a combat unit. So you could just have it parked next to, you know, like no passives, no forges, just staffs on it, just parked next to a unit that's enemy phasing that can be broken, and it can just keep pulling break off of them so that they can counterattack more consistently. So that's decent, that's not bad. Sandstorm, it's hard not to put this in S tier because with no rings, no passives, no forges, Tamara is one rounding just as well as Marin with 2 Spirit Dusts and Kagetsu with 2 energy drops. And I think she was energy dropped once or 0 times, but she was Draco shielded 2 or 3 times so that her defense is higher, so that she can Sandstorm for more damage. She has similar or more consistency to those units. Honestly, this is like one of the best passives in the game. It's definitely better than this, definitely better than this, definitely better than this. Is it better than Chaos Style? Is it the best passive in the game? Is it the best passive in the game? It's kind of hard for me to not say it is. Here's why. I'm gonna explain my reasoning. All right, this is speed +3 conditionally, and the condition is easy to meet and typically going to be the case. However, it's only when you attack. So this is like Lunar Brace, but for speed. This is only damage bonus conditionally. This only works when you're at full health. This has a 20% chance to work. This requires another unit to set it up. This is just always good. Honestly, you could argue this is better than Pincer Attack. But all of the, most, or if not all of these are conditional. This just always can proc, so it's always rolling it, regardless of phase or physical weapon. So one of the nice things about Sandstorm is you can throw Tamara Picket on any class or any emblem ring, and as long as it has physical weapons, so like if you throw on Roy, she can Binding Blade, which is basically weightless for her because it's like 8 weight or something, and she has like 8 to 9 build near endgame, and she can 1 to 2 range, boost her defensive stats, which is that's just what Binding Blade does, and she can roll for Sandstorms on it. So if she has like a 30 to 40% chance to proc this thing, and she's just getting hit by a bunch of things, she's just randomly killing everything, and most things she'll kill on might too, but she's also rolling for higher damage potential constantly. So I view this skill as like damage ceiling. It just keeps pushing damage up. So you can get to 1 rounding thresholds on the unit without it, but then with it, it just pushes her damage to insane potential, especially if you crit a Sandstorm. If you crit Sandstorm, you're dealing like 100+ damage per hit. And it's not really that hard to do, and you can get to like, I don't know, you can get to 100 crit on her builds. If you run like Killer Lance +5 with Core and Engraving, on like Ike or with Wrath or whatever, you could easily hit like 90 to 100 crit. And then if you also Sandstorm on top of that, you're one-shotting whatever procs this. And you could also Dex +10 her with a Byleth like Mage Knight for the Cavalry Dex +10 Instruct / Dance. Have her have 50% chance of Sandstorm. Honestly, I think this is the best class skill in the game. I don't see anything that's better than this. Well, maybe I do. Hold on, let's get into it. Alright. Let's say self-healing. Unit can target self-healing staffs, High Priest. It's alright. It almost never comes up, honestly. It's basically like being able to convert the thing into a vuln. It's something, it's situationally useful. Smash Plus, or I'm sorry, wait, is that Smash? Oh, I'm sorry, that's Air Raid. Their icons are so similar. My bad. This is Smash Plus. This is Air Raid. Alright, Air Raid. Air Raid. Air Raid, Air Raid, Air Raid, Air Raid. Where is Air Raid? Okay, if unit initiates combat with, I'm sorry, from a space a foe cannot enter, grant speed +5. So what does that mean? If you're a flyer on a flyer only, you attack a non-flyer, speed +5, only when you attack. I would say this is here. It's like Chaos style, except it's more conditional, but it's speed +5, and it's honestly not that hard to trigger. So it kind of makes Wyvern competitive speed-wise to Griffin, which is a little bit faster typically. Sometimes, like, it has a little bit less build, but it also has better speed growth, so it tends to have like +3 to 4 speed, maybe more, on a similarly leveled Wyvern, if it's the exact same unit, maybe even +5 more. But situationally, very good. It's hard to say it's not S tier because it basically can be the difference. +5 speed is literally what it takes to double. So if you're the same speed and you can air raid something, and there's tons of flyer only tiles in every map, except for maybe chapter 25. 26, there's a ton. 24, there's a lot. 23, there's a ton. 22, there's a good amount. 21, there's none. Yeah, I don't think there's air raid tiles in 21. 20, I don't think there's any. So most maps have air raid. Honestly, let's put it low S. Most maps have air raid tiles, but some don't. Whereas Chaos style, like, you're always going to be hitting physical things with magic, and you can switch to get the Chaos style, but typically you're going to get it. And also, most mages are slow. So basically, it works when it needs to all the time. Soul. Diamant. This one's interesting. Unit may recover 50% of HP, or damage dealt. Recover HP, half of damage dealt. Trigger percent equals dex. He has dex cap of 22, but with dex tonic, that pushes him to 24. If you gave him dex +5, you can get him to 29. If you instructed him or danced him with a Cav Byleth, you can get him to 39. So I'm just calling out the things you can push it up with, but typically it's around 1 and 5. So if he doubles on enemy phase, which he kind of can with speed wings, his speed is above average, and his build is quite high, so he can run like Ragnall Ike, become very tanky, and it doesn't really slow him down, it slows him down by 1. So if you give him like speed +5 and like a speed wing or 2, he would reasonably double most things, 1 to 2 range. And if he gets 5 attacks in, so that would just be 3 combats where he doubles, he basically is guaranteed to heal. And it's half of the damage dealt. So if he hits a 30, he heals for 15. And if you can instruct him with the dex +10 Byleth, it gets pretty stupid. It gets pretty good, actually. Then it goes to 1 and 3. So if he gets attacked 2 times and he doubles, he's basically guaranteed to heal there. So like, if he gets attacked 4 times and he's 1 and 3 proc, he should proc at least twice. And that is definitely the difference between living and dying. So it's actually kind of good. It's kind of underutilized. I would say it's at least high A tier, maybe low S. There is a case to be made that it's low S. Now it's low S because it needs support from other things, but in of itself, it's one of the few ways to heal an enemy phase outside of Nosferatu base game or Sorin DLC. And DLC, if you create a broken build in DLC, I'm sorry, but DLC, just by using it, breaks the game. You just overlevel your units on Star Sphere. You don't even need to run Emblem Rings. Like, you just have crazy stats and just win. So it's really hard to say how good DLC stuff is, because everything is good in DLC by default, because you're overleveled. Soul Blade, this is on Cephia's class, or Zephia, whatever, is Celestia. When attacking with a sword, damage is calculated using average of foe's defense and res. Honestly, this usually kind of is bad. I'm gonna say this is bad. There are situations. So here's why I think this is bad. Most things have lower res than they do defense. So because this takes both stats and averages them out, every single enemy you attack is going to have decent defense in relation to your attacks. So if I'm using 11 sword on an enemy armor who has like 15 res and like 45 defense, I'm now hitting a target with 30 res basically. So I've just doubled his defense against me. That's terrible. You don't want that. And most enemies typically have either bad res, slightly worse res than defense, or slightly higher res than defense. Very few enemies are exceptionally high res. There are more enemies that are exceptionally high defense than there are exceptionally high res. This is why Bolg and 11 sword are often considered the best weapons in the game. This takes 11 sword and makes it worse. And it also prevents her from simply just be like, oh, that's a mage, all right, I'm gonna smack this with like a silver steel sword or Folkvanger. Oh, that's an armor, I'm gonna smack this with 11 sword. She can't do that now, whereas a mage knight could. A mage knight could be like, oh, I don't one round this mage with 11 sword, I can just switch to like a steel sword and I have enough strength just to kill him on it. So that it's just bad. I don't think it's ever good. It's just terrible. Curious Dance, I would say it's better than Sandstorm. It's a little bit better, I would say. What does Curious Dance do? It heals... or I'm sorry, Special Dance. Yeah, that's better than Sandstorm. If unit uses Dance, grants Dex/Speed/Luck +3 to target for 1 turn. So not only do you refresh a unit, but you make them +6 hits, technically +9, because I think +3 Luck equals 3 hit. Also +3 crit avoid. So +9 hit, +3 speed, +1 crit, because 2 Dex equals 1 crit. So you slightly improve their hit rate and their crit reduction and their crit rate and so on, and their speed, while also refreshing them. And most units in the game have a Dex trigger. Like a lot of the royal classes, like Ivy has a Dex trigger, Saline, Alchrist, Tamara, Diamant, Alfred, Hort, all these royals have Dex trigger based abilities. So giving them +3 makes those abilities more consistent and more reliable, in addition to just improving everything that gets hit by it. So, and you're gonna, like, Dancer is the most free unit in the game. You can give him literally nothing and he contributes insanely. So yeah, I'd say it's fair to say it's the best. Spell Harmony, if unit initiates combat with a tome, grants tech equal to number of adjacent allies with tome. Typically this will get you like +1 to 2 damage based on positioning. I would say it's good. It's definitely not great because it's kind of hard to use. It requires a tome user to be within distance of foes, which is tricky because tome users tend to be frail, so it's hard to get them super close and then stand next to it and cast. So the condition to using it is tricky, but if you're pushing and attacking, you can kind of set this up and give yourself some extra damage. And it's on Sage, which is arguably one of the best classes in the game, though a lot of classes are really good. Alright, what else? We have... let's see, Swap on General. Used to switch places with adjacent ally. General... I mean... I don't think General is that good of a class, but this is some repositioning tool, so it has to at least be okay, right? It's at least decent. And then finally we have World Tree. There are others. I'll go over the DLC ones. Let It Fly... I don't know. I've never run Cannoneer outside of like a few maps. Convoy on Enchanter. That's like probably S. Let's see. Resist Emblems. 20% less damage. Fellchild Knell. I don't think it's that good. Spur Emblems. Start a player phase. Fills adjacent allies engage meter by 1. That's S tier. It fills other things. That's pretty good. That's actually pretty good. Even if you just use him just to do that. Resist Emblems, I would say, is like C. World Tree. How good do I think World Tree is? When used as a staff, may not consume a use. Trigger percent equals Dex. Hort tends to be around 30 to 40 Dex. So in a normal run, where you're welling and you're getting rescues for free and warps for free from the well, even if like you get 1 or 2 extra of those, I don't think it matters too much, but how good is it? So what does this do really? It saves you money in theory and in practice. So if you have a Hortensia just spamming heals and spamming warps and spamming utility staff like obstruct and freeze and silence and so on. She squeezes more uses out of this. This saves you money, and money is good in this game. So wasting money on things prevents you from upgrading weapons, prevents you from hitting donation tiers, so that you can get like ore, like the iron, like the metal and stuff. It prevents you from just buying metal. So being able to save and squeeze money out of anything is always going to be good. And honestly, I think this deserves a spot in high S tier, because it saves you money, and economy equals better units. So if I have Hortensia healing and she's my main healer and she keeps spamming mend and she squeezes, I don't know, 30% extra uses out of mend, I don't have to buy a new mend staff you know, as quickly as I would if another unit was using that. So this does save you money, and if you use her in combination with Anna, who makes you money with Anna's personal skill, you will just be more efficient economically and be able to upgrade more things and improve your team and buy more stuff, which just makes your entire team better. So I think these utilities are definitely the best two in the game. And then all these other ones are situational, but they're all very strong when used correctly or leveraged correctly. The A tiers, you know, there's some honorable mentions. Some of these, you could argue Soul is S. I have to test it more, but it seems like it has a lot of potential on like an Ike Diamant tank. He's one of the few units in the game who can use Ragnar without it really slowing him down, which is actually pretty valuable. He also has high defense, so it's pretty decent. The B tiers, most of them are on either niche classes or they have like niche use cases. The C tiers on even nichier classes or have even nichier use cases. And then the D tier, this is just straight up bad. It just hurts your sword damage for no reason. It's kind of annoying to play around too, because you're not used to it. You're not going to be used to it unless you run her Zephyr or Celestia or whatever a lot. Like, you're going to look at an armor and go to Levin sword it and be like, why do I only deal 20 damage to this? Why do I only deal 20 times 2 instead of 40 times 2 here? What the hell is going on? And then you'll be like, oh yeah, this bad passive, that's right. So in most cases it kind of doesn't matter, to be fair, but in the cases where you really want that Levin sword damage on like some high health, low res enemy, it will typically make them a little tankier to you and probably push you away from getting the kill instead of more towards it. So it's actually like a detrimental passive, which is not what you want. You want your passive on your Levin sword unit to be killing things easily. Just keep shaking. Alright, so that's it for this one. If you enjoyed this or found this useful, definitely like and subscribe. This is where I think all the class skills are at currently. Now you can fight me on Sandstorm, but you need to watch my Ringless No Somniel run and see how often she's carrying damage and how often she's getting kills that other units couldn't get, because even with crits, Kagetsu Swordmaster 2 energy drops, he needs crits to kill, and the crit rate is less consistent than her 33 or 32 dex Sandstorm. So his crit rate is typically like 20 to 30. But her Sandstorm chance is always 32. So she always has 32 crit at all times, no matter what. And she can Brave Lance enemies and proc up to 4 Sandstorms, and typically she'll proc 2 in Brave Lancing. Whereas if he were to Brave Sword, he can't proc crits on it because it doesn't have crits on it. Unless you would crit engrave it, which there's no engravings in the No Somniel run. So if it has that much potential with almost nothing, it has more potential when you start dumping resources into Tamara. And that's what I have observed and many have observed. So if you still are super against this, resource dump Tamara and just watch how insane she gets, if you really need it to be that extreme. But even with like almost no resources, she's popping off in a Ringless No Somniel run. So I don't know what to tell you. Alright, peace.